Hello and welcome to this special bonus episode of The Dairy Edge. Teagasc are running a weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also being made available as a podcast. On this week's webinar, Deirdre Hennessy joins Stuart Childs to give tips and advice on establishing clover in grazing swards.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy. Today I'm delighted to have Deirdre on the line with me to talk about clover. And as I said in the tweet the other night, LED is telling us that the grass growth is going to pick up dramatically in the next number of days, and I think we can see that already even from yesterday's what was a lovely day. There was a real turnaround in grass growth, I think, from what I could see anyway. So it's a great opportunity now to look at the next big step that we're all expected to take, which is incorporation of clover into our swards. So some people might think that this is new information or a new area, but Deirdre has been researching this area for a good number of years and has a lot of knowledge in this area and has been doing it quite successfully. So Deirdre is going to be able to give us a quick synopsis of why we should be doing it, and then I suppose we want to really focus on how we're going to go about it as the main thing, is the main piece of information that people are looking for. So as I said, it's a major part of our sustainability team. It looks like it's very likely that we're going to have a reduction in the nitrogen allowances that we're allowed on farm for the coming year through the department regulations. And that means that we have to start making moves to offset that reduction by incorporating clover into the farm. So many people have tried this in the past and possibly haven't had great success with it. And I suppose once bitten, twice shy is some of what you would hear coming back from people. But we really will have to take this step. And I suppose it's just following the chain of command, really, Deirdre, in one sense, in terms of establishing it. So grazing management is one of the key things in it. And I suppose that would be quite different now compared to what it would have been when the original efforts to establish clover would have been introduced. So I won't take any more from your presentation in saying what I'm saying, and I'll let you go through the detail. And as always, folks, put the questions in through the Q&A there, and I'll put them to Deirdre as we go along. So thanks, Deirdre.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, so good morning, everybody, and Stuart, thanks for the invitation. So look, as Stuart said, I'm going to talk a little bit about establishing grass white clover swards. Clover looks like, we're all going to have some clover on our farms as things are progressing now, particularly if we're going to have cotton nitrogen. And we've a good body of work here in Moorepark over the last 8 years on the Moorepark farm here, going into our 9th year, where we've compared grass only getting 250 kilos of nitrogen. So our standard type system with grass white clover getting 150 kilos of nitrogen, both stocked to 2.74 cows per hectare. And, in terms of herbage production, we're not seeing any reduction in herbage production with the clover and the reduced nitrogen. So the nitrogen is making up for that 100 kilo reduction in fertiliser. And, that's actually a 40% reduction in fertiliser. There at the moment, I suppose the Green Deal target is a 20% reduction in fertiliser. What that's going to translate to for Ireland, we're still not sure, but certainly clover offers us huge opportunities in terms of reducing fertiliser nitrogen. And not only does it allow us to reduce fertiliser nitrogen, but there's also an animal production benefit in terms of milk solids production per cow. So here in Moorepark, over that 8-year period, we're seeing somewhere between 25 kilos depending on the year, but on average 20 kilos of milk solids per cow per year, greater than in the grass only system. So look, just one slide around the benefits of white clover, which I've touched on already. But when you add clover into the sward, regardless of the fertiliser application rate, there is generally an increase in herbage production seen. So it can be small, maybe 500 kilos, but on average across nitrogen fertiliser rates, it's up to around 1.5 tonnes of dry matter per hectare. And in Clonakilty, Brian McCarthy would have found an average at the 250 kilos of nitrogen, he found an average of 1.5 tonnes of dry matter per hectare increase in herbage production. In terms of milk solids production, I've already touched on this, but anywhere between 20 and 50 kilos. That's what we found between the Moorepark work and the Clonakilty work. And I suppose a really important part here, if we're talking about clover in the context of fertiliser, is that clover is a legume, which means it can fix atmospheric nitrogen and make it available for plant growth. So it's available not only for the growth of the clover, but also for the accompanying species in the sward, which I suppose we're talking about really is perennial ryegrass in our grass white clover swards. But we do need about 20% average sward clover content to see these animal and sward production benefits. So I suppose what we really want to talk about today is how do we go about getting clover into the sward. Okay, so we're really going to focus on the management around sowing clover, be it reseeding or over sowing, but we can touch a bit on management if there's any questions on that as well. Okay, so you know, getting clover established on your farm, I suppose there's 4 key steps here. All right, so you need to select the paddocks you're going to sow. Okay, and that's going to be based around soil fertility, perennial ryegrass content, and weed content. We'll go into a bit more detail in these in a few minutes. You want to be selecting medium-leaved white clover cultivars for cattle graze swards, and the best time of year to be over sowing is from now until kind of the middle of June. Okay, so weather conditions are improving now and soil temperatures is increasing, so you know, good time to be thinking about over sowing and reseeding. And then post sowing management is really important in terms of once the seed germinates and it starts to establish, well, your post sowing management is going to have a big role in how that clover persists. Okay, so going a little bit deeper into the selection of the paddocks. Look, whether you're reseeding, full reseed, or you're oversowing, soil fertility is hugely important. So we know perennial ryegrass needs good soil fertility. White clover absolutely needs good soil fertility. White clover is far more sensitive to soil fertility than perennial ryegrass is. So you do need to be at your index 3 for P's and K's minimum and soil pH of 6.3 or greater. White clover doesn't like acidic soils. It's not going to persist very well in those. And then the next thing is, you know, selecting your paddocks. So if you want to oversow, and you probably all have paddocks that are suitable on your farm right now for oversowing, they're going to be ones with high perennial ryegrass content. Open sward, what I mean by open is that it doesn't have a dense butt in the sward, as in it's not a paddock that's there for a long time and you know there's a lot of weed grasses at the base of it. So we want it open, so you know a more recent reseed that you've applied weed control to, and the reason being, you know, if they're recently reseeded, your soil fertility is probably good in those, and you will have used your your post-emergent spray on those, so your weed content will be low. So that means you have a high perennial ryegrass content and you have an open sward in the sense that you can get seed to soil contact with the clover seed. Then if you're doing a full reseed, you're probably going to pick your more poorly performing paddocks, and these are likely the ones that have a low perennial ryegrass content. And you know, you can use pasture base to help you select your paddocks in terms of which ones are the lowest performing on the farm. And then in terms of weed control, before you oversow, you need to do your weed control. So if you have a relatively suitable sward, but you have a lot of weeds in it, best to do your weed control now and then oversow once you have your weeds dealt with. You need to be aware though that some of the grassland herbicides have a withdrawal period of up to 4 months, that you can't sow clover until 4 months have passed after treatment. So you need to do that as early as possible in the year, because you're going to be getting much later with oversowing, and success with oversowing declines the later we are in the year. Or do your weed control now and have your swards cleaned up now, and then go in and oversow as early as you can next year, sometime in April. If you're reseeding, full reseed, you know, burn off with your glyphosate before you cultivate, and your post-emergent spray is really important. Okay, then, you know, right, you have your sward ready, whether you're oversowing it or you're reseeding it. Now you need to pick your cultivars. So medium-leaved cultivars, white clover cultivars, are most suited for cattle graze swards. And every year the Department of Ag publishes the recommended list, which you'll know because it's where you'll find the PPI and your perennial ryegrass cultivars, but they also have the white clover cultivars there. So look, I've just taken the part of the table with the medium-leaved cultivars on it, and you can see at the moment what's available in terms of medium-leaved. You've Chieftain, Buddy, Iona, Crusader and Aberhurled. And in Moorepark, we've actually used all of those in various paddocks. Then when do you oversow, when do you reseed? Okay, so it's when you've white clover in the sward, it's pretty much the same whether you're oversowing or you're reseeding. Okay, so you're better off going kind of the April, May, June period. Reasons being soil temperature is still on an increasing plane. Generally, soil moisture deficit isn't a problem, particularly if you're April and May. Some might argue we might be in a little bit of bother this year with soil moisture, given that we've had a very dry April. But in general, April, May, June are the best times in terms of soil temperature and soil moisture. But really important as well is there's plenty opportunity to graze your new reseeds or your oversown swards between when they're sown and closing in the autumn for the winter. So, you know, you're getting a good number of grazings in, you're giving that clover plant every chance to establish and to start to develop stolons. And then you also, when you this is just for reseeds, but this is, you know, you have the most opportunity to get out post-emergent spray the earlier you sow in the year. So you know yourself, if you're reseeding in August, your opportunity for post-emergent spray, the window there can disappear very fast if you have wet weather or poor soil conditions.
And Deirdre, that stolon formation is critical to the long-term establishment of
yes.
that. Yes,
George. If so, when the clover plant starts, you know, the first 3 months it forms kind of a rosette. So it looks very small in the sward and it's very much confined around where that seed was sown. But after about 3 months, it starts to develop. It starts to branch and develop stolons and so on. But there's another phase then where it takes somewhere between 18 months and 2 years for the plant to be in the phase where, you know, we call it the normal clover growing phase, or the clonal phase. So between about 3 months and 18 to 24 months, the plant is going through the expansion phase, and it's starting to send out stolons, it's starting to branch, it's starting to spread out in the sward. And it's really important during that phase or that period that those swards are well grazed, so that there's light getting down to the base of the sward for stolon production, and the clover isn't getting shaded out by the grass, because if it does, there's not going to be a lot of photosynthesis going on in the clover plant, because light simply isn't getting to the leaves, and it's not going to have the energy to produce new branches and new stolons. Okay, and the last point I have here then is following on from that, Stuart. So it's all about the post-sowing management. What do you do? So you have the seed sown, you've closed the gate now, and you've walked away for a little while to leave your seed establish, to germinate and start to establish. So on reseeds, post-emergent spray must be clover friendly. And I know this has been an issue and it's a concern this year, but Clover Max will be available from May onwards, probably mid to late May. So we will have a clover-friendly post-emergent spray available this year. And it's really important that, you know, you do get in and you do get that post-emergent spray, and it's your best chance for weed control in a clover sward. First grazing at a low cover, so, you know, around 1,000 kilos, so like it's light, but it's as soon as the sward is fit to be grazed, same as in a perennial ryegrass sward. If you can pull the tillers and they stay in the soil, then it's fit to be grazed. So you need to go in at that low cover, and you know that's got to do with allowing light to get down to the base of the sward, and you know that works for perennial ryegrass tillering and for clover production in a grass clover sward. So it's beneficial for both species. In terms of if you're oversowing, there's going to be, if you've oversowed, you don't want to get a really high cover building up on the sward, because you're going to end up with shading and you're going to shade out that young clover plant that's growing. So for both reseeding and oversowing, try and get in there around 1,000 kilos of dry matter per hectare. Very low cover, I appreciate, but it's worth it in terms of getting the sward established. And after that, you need to be going into those swards regularly. Don't believe in the covers get over 1,400 kilos at the most. So look, in your oversown paddocks, you're probably going to have to skip in the same as you would in a new reseed where you want to get a good establishment. graze down to 4 centimetres. It's worth reducing the fertiliser nitrogen for 1 to 2 rotations after oversowing, again to give clover a chance so that you're not shading it out with the more mature grass. Clean off well in the autumn, get down to 3.5 centimetres. Same reasons that you want for in a grass sward. You want light down to the base of the sward for the tiller production or for the stole-on production, and then graze as soon as you can in the spring, particularly the newer swards. Again, it's just to take off any heavy cover and give the plant plenty opportunity in the spring to establish more clover plants through stolen production, and also not to shade out the new clover plants.
So Deirdre, we would have spoken about it there now yesterday as well, like just the timings that you engage in Moorepark. Now obviously it's all dependent on growth phases, etc., and how fast seeds establish, etc. But like I said to you yesterday, generally I think we probably tend to be spraying at a commercial level when we're grazing it here in Moorepark. So we've already been in with the spray at that stage. So just go through the time phases that you kind of use on the farm here.
So with in a reseed, we probably go in 5 to 6 weeks after sowing, Stuart, with our spray, and then we'll graze it a week later. We'll graze it as soon as we can after we put out the spray. So you probably want to be going a little bit earlier than maybe you think you need to in terms of getting the spray if you want to get those low covers grazed. And look, if you've gone to the expense of reseeding or oversowing, you might as well get the benefit of the money you've spent in terms of that and get your clover established. So, you really want to be keeping an eye on the swards at about 5 weeks. Look, in a cold year, it might be 6 weeks. You do need seedling weeds. So docks is generally what we would be spraying for. You do need those to be actively growing, and you do need them to be there. You need to be able to see them, because if they're not actively growing, they're not going to. You're not going to be able. The post-emergent spray isn't going to have any effect on them because they're not there. But generally, 5 to 6 weeks, Stuart, you'd want to be going in with the spray.
And the other thing, I suppose, with the clover safe sprays as well, like they're probably, the window of opportunity isn't as good as it would be with the non-clover safe sprays. So it's even more critical that people spray that bit quicker, like.
Exactly, really important to get the weeds at the seedling stage. Once they start to establish properly, your spray is going to be less effective. Yeah. And then as the sward establishes, your opportunity for spraying is much reduced. So you need to get in as soon as you can, basically. So somewhere around 5 to 6 weeks, and you should get a good kill then. So that's what we do here, and we generally have good weed control in those paddocks, Stuart.
Yeah, there is definitely. And in terms of we'll say you said it already, but just like I suppose to get it into people's heads in relation to normal reseeding, not to mind oversowing or reseeding with clover and incorporate it into it as well. You're literally only jumping into the paddock and clipping it off. You might only get one grazing off of it for that first grazing, and you're not going to get 3 grazings off the paddock.
No. So you want to get in and get out.
Yeah.
Because the longer you're in there, the more treading is going on in the paddock as well, and that can damage the young plants. So you want to get in, clean it off, and get out as fast as you can. So and you do need to be a little bit conscious of the weather. So if it's going to pour rain, you wouldn't, you hold off for a day or two. But when you go in at those low covers, Stuart, you do get them grazed off quickly.
Yeah.
And that has big benefits, whether it's just a grass only sward you're after sowing, or whether it's a grass white clover sward. It really helps the swards to tiller, and it really helps the clover to establish.
Very good, excellent. So the nitrogen element then of it, you're saying, we'll say for the post sowing, is that for the oversowing and the reseed?
Well, remember, if you do full reseed, your clover or your grass part of the sward is very hungry for nitrogen, so you do need to feed it. It's more so for the oversowing, Stuart, to reduce the the nitrogen. Certainly for the first rotation or the rotation in which you do the oversowing, just to keep the grass a little bit checked. But if you have a high demand for grass on the farm, you're probably going to be going around the farm 18 to 21 days anyway. So if you have a high demand for grass and you do need to put out the fertiliser, you can do that once you're hitting the next grazing at 12 to 1400 pre-grazing herbage mass. So, the clover doesn't start fixing nitrogen until somewhere around 12 to 18 months after it's sown. And, you know, clovers, like any other plant, it does need some nitrogen for growth. So it will use what's supplied with the fertiliser or what's mineralised in the soil to help it grow and establish. So, you know, you have to take into consideration what grass demands are on your farm.
Okay. So there's just a question there in relation to the Clover Max being available now. Is it sanctioned? It's more or less being sanctioned as of today, so that the merchants will be able to have it within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So it will be available from mid-May.
It will be available sometime in May, Stuart, probably middle to end of May. But look, if you're planning on reseeding now, that timing works perfect in terms of it being available.
Yeah, very good. And I suppose, is there any advice around the whole nitrogen fertiliser piece? Obviously, we're sowing clover to reduce the nitrogen use into the future, but like you said there now, that the fixation doesn't really happen for the next 12 months. So you're reducing it now for the first 2 rotations post, especially in the oversowing scenario. But are you going back to normal then for the rest of the year, and it's next year that you're expecting it to start doing its thing in terms of nitrogen fixation then, like?
Yeah, so again, Stuart, you have to weigh up, you know, the demands on the farm in terms of what the demand for grass is. What we have done both here, we've gone back to almost normal fertiliser, and we've gone straight with 150 kilos of nitrogen from sowing. Certainly, you will need, you know, again, depending on your stocking rate and your demand, you probably will need to go back for the rest of the year to relatively normal fertiliser. And definitely in the spring, you're going to go with what we call normal fertiliser. But, you know, if you sow now, by next summer, you will be able to reduce fertiliser. Okay, you mightn't be reducing by 100 kilos, but you can be reducing it by around 25 to 50 kilos of nitrogen next summer. And then you can come back. So, you know, that would be aiming for maybe 200 kilos per hectare next year. And you can drop it a bit more than the following year, you know, if you're confident in your swards. And you're not going to be dropping fertiliser or reducing fertiliser rather than dropping it until kind of May time onwards. That's the way we operate here as well. You know, we put the same amount of nitrogen on the grass only in the grass clover swards up until May, and it's from then on that we reduce the fertiliser. So we're saving the 100 kilos from now on, basically. And that's what Brian McCarthy is doing in Clonakilty as well. Okay, so, you know, how do you drop the fertiliser then in the mid-season? So, look, in our research work, we've gone with a small amount of nitrogen in every rotation, so around 9 kilos of nitrogen fertiliser. I know that is more challenging at farm level because that's a small amount of fertiliser we're putting out. In the new study that I've just started this year in Moorepark, we're going to compare what we've been doing for the last number of years with a different regime where we're going to be skipping nitrogen every second rotation in the summer. Okay, the reason we're doing that is, look, that's probably what's more feasible at farm level, but we do need to see, does it influence or impact on herbage production in the summer, and then on herbage quality, which would subsequently impact milk production. But I would say, you know, if farmers are confident of their swards, that's one option to do, is to skip a round of nitrogen. If you're going to do that, probably July time is the best time to be skipping, because you should have, you know, any surplus bales that you need, you know, for feeding in case of a drought or early in the spring or whatever. You should have your bales made at that stage. You know, in a normal year when we've warm weather and moisture available in the soil, there's mineralization occurring. So there is nitrogen circulating in the soil, and then you'll have your clover, you know, from a year in, will be starting to fix nitrogen as well and making it available. So you have a lot of things feeding in there to the kind of June, July period in terms of reducing fertilizer.
And I suppose I suppose there's going to be an uptake in hopefully this year in the establishment of clover on farm. So next year, like the fertiliser trial that you're talking about for this year is going to be important. Do you think you'll be able to get enough information from the 1 year this year to kind of make a call on if that 15 units every second round is better than the 7 to 8 units like every round? Like,
yeah, so look, we'll have the first year's results, Stuart. Like any study like this, we need a number of years because, you know, what they say, one swallow doesn't make a summer. But, you know, we just need to have the confidence. And look, it's great that we have this started. And you know, we will be able to give some guidance and some information. And look, you don't have to skip your nitrogen on the whole farm in that rotation. You know, you could do it over 2 rotations, so you could
hedge your bets a small bit, like
around on one half of the milking platform and then on the other in the next round. And at least by doing that, there's a little bit of I suppose reassurance, or there's a bit of a, you know, a safety net there that you're not cutting the nitrogen across the whole platform.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose in terms of the most critical elements of the whole process for you, it's the grazing at that early stage to get the light and keeping it, and those, like the first 3 rotations post sowing are the most critical element of trying to establish it. Yeah. And it's nearly even more critical than fertiliser usage even.
Yeah. So Stuart, so your first rotation after sowing, so the first grazing, that very low grazing, low cover grazing is really important. But I would say for the rest of the year, Stuart, you know, trying to get in at that 1200-1400. Okay, leaving aside the last rotation where you know, where you've been building cover and your cover is going to be higher than that. But you know, it's really important in that first year to keep your cover low. You know, again, within reason, because depending on your requirements on the farm. But you know, after that, you need to be measuring grass, and you need to be making decisions around the grass availability on the farm in terms of your wedge, so that you can see where surpluses are going to develop, or where your covers are going to get higher than desired. And, you know, making the decisions around that, be it taking out bales or, you know, bringing other stock in to graze the platform if that's possible, you know, whatever way. But, you know, you don't want to be, you know, you shouldn't with grass only swards either, but like certainly with grass clover, you don't want to be going into covers of 1800, 2000, because that's not doing any part of the sward any good. So, you know, I keep saying to people, look, if you're good at managing an ordinary grass sward, you'll be able to manage a grass clover sward, because the grazing management principles are exactly the same, you know. So like the good thing about clover is it slots into our existing system, it slots into our existing targets, you know, in terms of target pre-grazing herbage mass, target post-grazing sward height, and so on.
Yeah, we don't have to change the system, like.
There's no change to the system, but look, you have to be good at managing grass. You know, if you're good at having nice leafy sward there for the cows all year, you'll be well able to manage clover in that. You know, clover really complements perennial ryegrass, you know, in terms of lots of things like its growth pattern. So it's not overly productive in the spring when grass grows really fast. Then we get a high clover content increases over the spring into the summer, you know, and as grass quality starts to decline there in kind of the June time with heading, clover content is increasing. So it's lifting the quality of what the cow is eating in that period where we can see a drop in grass quality. So look, clover fits very well in. If you can manage grass well, you can manage your clover.
Okay, and I'm shocked that this question hasn't come in yet, but in terms of bloat, I know we generally don't have a problem on the farms in Moorepark, but I think there's only one cow has gone down with bloat in a good number of years. But at a commercial level, that's a major concern for people. Yeah. And of course, bloat hens is after, like, nearly like the clover spray as well. They tried to remove everything that we had going for us with clover initially. So what do you do to deal with the bloat? Or I suppose maybe it's slightly different in your case because you're trialing it on, you've a whole clover farmlet now for it. Like, but for the people that are going to be transitioning into clover over the next 4 or 5 years, is there any thoughts on how to manage bloat, or should it be something that people should be even concerned about, really? Like,
look, generally, if you've good grazing management, it's not a big concern. Look, I fully appreciate, you know, that farmers are concerned about it, because obviously, you know, it can be an expensive issue if you lose a cow or so on. But look, good grazing management, and like really important, if you are changing between grass only and grass clover swards, or if you're going into a clover paddock, even within a clover system where there is a high clover content, really important not to have the cows hungry going into the swards. Okay, so, you know, if your cows are hitting 4 centimeters, they're not working excessively hard to get down below that. That means they're not hungry. So try not to have them hungry going into the sward. So don't be grazing below 4 centimeters. kind of the perfect storm for clover is if you have a leafy grass sward with a lot of clover in it and it's a very wet morning and the cows are very hungry, you know. So a lot of things have to come together in terms of having a problem with bloat. But, you know, one thing you can do is if you are worried that cows are going into a very a paddock with a lot of clover in it and you're worried, you know, you could put up a 3-hour wire, so you're forcing the cows to eat grass as well as clover, and that will reduce or almost eliminate the risk of bloat. So bloat occurs when you get a build-up of froth in the rumen, and that happens when you have very low dry matter material going into the rumen and not a lot of fibre. And then, so cows have to get rid of the gas that's produced in the rumen anyway, regardless of what they're eating, and they do that by burping. But if you have this froth or foam building up in the rumen, they can't get the gas out, and that's what results in bloat. So if you can get the cows to eat some fibre, so basically get them to eat the grass rather than just preferentially picking the clover, you very much reduce the risk of there being any clover. So, you know, that's what we do in Moorepark, and the lads in Clonakilty do that as well. But to be honest, Stuart, we haven't had to do that for years in terms of putting up the 3-hour wire. But we are careful, you know, we do make sure that the residuals aren't going below 4 centimetres. Look, in the mid-season, the cows don't need to be working hard. You know, the grass is growing. Generally, grass growth is above demand. So we don't need to make them be working really hard to be grazing down to below 4 centimetres. And generally, if that's our target, you know, they're not going to be hungry going into the next break. So, you know, there's lots of management things there, you know, and they're simple enough, and most lads are probably hitting that anyway. They're 4 centimetre residuals, so their risk of bloat is much reduced. But, you know, you do keep an eye on the cows if you think they're going into a paddock that has a lot of clover in it. Just check them after milking, because if they're going to get bloat, they're probably going to get it relatively fast after they go out in the paddock.
Okay, so like in general though, it's not something that people should be overly concerned about.
No, I don't think so, Stuart. And like you said, you know, bloat isn't an issue here and hasn't been for years. As you know, in the 8 years of the work here, we've lost 1 cow with bloat.
And Fergal is something similar, even I think.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Clan, yeah.
One in Clan.
Yeah, and sure, like that. Well, I suppose it's definitely, you know, it was bloat, but it could happen anyway. Like.
Yeah, so you can get bloat on a grass sward if it's lush and there's a high nitrogen content in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the big problem with it is that preferential grazing of the clover. Yeah. So they do like they just gorge themselves on it. Like. Yeah. So I suppose one thing that I'd say to people, if they find that the cows are bursting into the parlour in the morning or in the evening milking because you've pushed them a bit harder, you know, they're nearly knocking one another to get the bit of meal that's been fed or whatever, that's a good sign that they're a bit hungry maybe. So you might want to have your 3-hour wire up in that scenario then, really.
Yeah. And look, if you're feeding a little bit of concentrate in the parlour, that's going to help as well, because there is a bit of fibre
in it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, very good. So I suppose just to sum it up, so Deirdre, like the growth is really beginning to come at us now. So, like you said there some people maybe over towards the east of the country might be getting a little bit concerned about soil moisture deficits, but at the same time, like the further you delay this, the closer you're getting to that deficit issue, really. So you'd be better off moving sooner rather than later, especially for oversowing. Yeah. Like reseeding, I suppose, is going to start. It has started to take place, and I suppose it's probably the easier way of establishing it in one sense, without a doubt. So the overall plan for people then, I think Brian said it there at the dairy conference maybe 2 years ago, like we're in a tricky phase now over the next 4 years as we're trying to move from maybe zero clover in a lot of cases or minimal clover into how we're hoping is going to be that 20% clover that you said is going to give the benefits in terms of the fixation and the performance of the animal as well. So the strategy that people need to be employing, so like I think Mike is talking about maybe 30% a year between both conventional reseeding and your oversowing. Mm-hmm. And so that means 120% of the farm is going to be done with clover over the next 4 years. Yeah. And we're building in that the fallback of not all of the oversowing is going to be a success. And I suppose we have to be very clear with people from the outset as well that is the case. Not all the oversowing is going to be a success, because for one reason or another. Like you said, the soil moisture deficits might catch people. Something mightn't go right for you, and the grazing just might be a little bit delayed or whatever, and it could impact on the performance of it. So the plan is to do 30% a year. The easy piece is probably the 10% for the normal reseeding, because it's just, as you said, burn it off with glyphosate and go ahead and get it reseeded. The trickier bit is probably identifying the paddocks that are suitable now, and preparing the paddocks for next year. And the other thing about the soil fertility, from my conversations that I've had with both yourself and Mike over the last couple of months in it, is like the soil fertility, like the pH, like you said, is so important to clover. Like, you don't really want to be going in with lime today and trying to oversow clover in the field next week, really. So you don't. You actually want to have those fields identified now, and maybe be touching them up with lime during the course of the summer, so that they're in that positive, good pH position before you actually oversow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that people need to get right, so that plan it's not a case of just go out and oversow the whole farm. The soil fertility has to be got right, and in reality it needs to be got right in advance. So if there's a P&K issue that needs to be dealt with, it needs to be dealt with. But the lime is probably one of the most critical things, really, is it, in terms of helping the establishment of it, like.
So, if you've identified paddocks and you have to manage them in terms of weed control, well, at the same time you can be getting your soil fertility right as well, because you want to give the clover every chance to establish. And if you're going to be starting off with everything not right, either it has a challenge from weeds, or it has a challenge from low soil pH, or there isn't adequate P&K available in the soil, you're starting on the back foot already. So if you're not going to be able to oversow this year for whatever reason, take this as an opportunity to start preparing. So maybe select your paddocks that you want to oversow next year. You'll have your soil fertility results, have a look at them, see what you need to do with them. Look at the weed content. Do you need to spray them? If you use post-emergent spray on a reseed, you probably won't need to reseed them. You'll probably be okay. But if you're a bit concerned about the docks or any other weeds that are in it, go ahead and treat them as well this year. And you'll be well set up then for next year. And look, I think we all need to start planning, and like you said, Stuart, either reseeding or oversowing, whichever method you use, just be prepared, and be prepared to manage it once the seed starts to establish. And look, a lot of people think that the clover is going to disappear after 3 or 4 or 5 years anyway. Look, we've swards in Moorepark that are in their 9th year since they were sown, and we haven't oversowed those, and the clover content in those is still hitting the 20%. So and all we can put that down to is good grazing management, and the soil fertility is right in those paddocks. They're index 3 for peas, and some of them are, so they're either 3 or 4 then for Ks. Okay, their pH is 6.3 or more. They're grazed 9 to 10 times a year, depending on the year. We do the things that I said there. We graze down to 4 centimeters. We graze to 3.5 where we can in the first and last rotation. We don't leave very high covers build up on them. We do take bales of silage off them if we need to. We don't take heavy cuts of silage off them, just because they're not part of the silage ground. But we have other ground, and it's 4 or 5 years there, and we've taken first cut silage off them, probably for 4 years. And their clover content would still be very happy with it in those. And look, clover content does fluctuate a little bit year to year, and sometimes in the spring it looks really low, and you're like, geez, there's no clover there, I'm going to be in the bother. But hit this time in April, soil temperature is increasing, and the clover starts to come. So, soil temperature is really important around clover. Firstly, it doesn't grow at soil temperatures below 8 degrees. So that's why if we have a very cold spring, you won't see a whole lot of clover in the sward. But it's also important when it's sown for germination and establishment, you need to be over that 8 degrees. So look, clover, if it's sown well, it establishes, it can persist once it's managed. And look, take the opportunity now to either start putting the clover in or getting your swards ready to put it in next year. But I think, given the pressures that are on farming for a whole variety of reasons, clover is definitely a good option. It's not going to solve all our problems, in terms of environmental sustainability, but it's going to help us a lot along the way without penalising our farmers in terms of their production, milk solids and herbage production.
So a good question that I was just actually going to say to you as well from Alan Poole in Wexford there. How do you estimate the percentage of clover in the sward? Because he says within their own discussion group walks, the estimates can vary widely. Like, what's the best way of getting your eye in on it?
That's a very good question, because it is hard to know how much clover is in the sward. As a rule of thumb, very rough, if you think there's 50% clover in the sward, there's probably 25%. Okay. Clover has a lower dry matter than grass, maybe 1 to 2% lower, but also, because it has, the bigger leaves, the trifolium leaves, it looks like it's taking up more space in the sward. So, roughly half. Now, totally separate to this, we are working on a project through Vista Milk where we're hoping to develop an app to estimate clover content. So, it's a few years away yet, but like that, you'll be able to walk out into the paddock, take a photo on your mobile phone, and it'll tell you how much clover is in the sward. And I think that'll be really beneficial for farmers. We have some preliminary work done on that from one time point, and we're seeing good estimation from image analysis in terms of clover content. But we're a while away from getting that working on our mobile phone. We're doing proof of concept at the moment, but we have started now this year a bigger program to try and look at clover right across the year in grey swards.
Excellent, very good. So I suppose we didn't go into the actual establishment methods. I suppose Deirdre might come back to covering that maybe another day, maybe.
Yeah.
So just, I suppose, to get it into people's heads about the plan really is the main thing from today, to set out the ground in front of them. And the most important thing from my perspective anyway, and I'm sure you think the same way, is that people don't set themselves up for the fall with it. Yeah. So if they think about it now, where is going to be suitable to do it this year? And as you said, maybe there may not be ground. Now you'd expect that there will be something on most farms that people will be able to oversow, and obviously the normal reseeding will give you the opportunity to bring in stuff straight away. But to get everything in place before we leap right in, I suppose, because the temptation is there to just go and do it. And if we haven't conditions right, it is going to fail, and people are going to have a sour taste in their mouth basically as a result of it. So look, I think that was a very, very useful conversation today, Deirdre. Thanks very much for taking your time to talk to us, and we'll leave it at that for today, and wish everybody well for the week. It's going to be a good week, so take advantage of it, I suppose, in every sense. And everybody take care and stay safe in the meantime, and we'll talk to you again next week.
That's all for this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar series. And don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with our usual Dairy Edge interview on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and thanks for listening.